This is Jack Teixeira, a 21-year-old U.S. Air National Guardsman who found himself in hot water. Jack's always been a bit of a tech whiz and loves to spend his free time gaming online with his buddies. It was during one of these gaming sessions that he made a grave mistake. You see, Jack had access to some highly sensitive files about the ongoing war in Ukraine and the U.S. spying on allies, and in a moment of carelessness, he shared those files in the chat room. Little did Jack know, those files would quickly make their way into the hands of the wrong people. The documents revealed that China was providing weapons to Russia in Ukraine, which is a major concern for the U.S. and its allies. Following the leak, there has been a considerable uproar and concerns have been raised about the extent of China's support for Russia. In today's video, we are going to unravel the mystery of Russia-China relations. We'll tell why China still hesitates to fully support Moscow, and will expound on the implications of the geopolitical chessboard for the world order. But first, stay up to date on the latest economic insights and analysis by subscribing to our channel. Join our community of savvy investors and business enthusiasts who never miss a beat in the ever-changing world of finance. Is China secretly arming Russia? So, have you heard the rumors that China might be hooking Russia up with weapons? It's true. Apparently, China has been ramping up its military production and is now the fourth largest arms supplier in the world. And according to Simon Weisman from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, China's weapons are getting more advanced, with their drones being one area that Russia is particularly interested in. But here's the thing. While the U.S. claims that Chinese companies have already provided non-lethal support to Russia, there's new information that suggests China might soon provide lethal support as well. However, Maria Shagina, an expert in economic sanctions at the International Institute of Strategic Studies, thinks that China is not openly supplying Russia with weapons, but might be secretly selling them high-tech products that have military uses. For instance, there's evidence to suggest that China is the biggest exporter of semiconductors to Russia, often through shell companies in Hong Kong and the United Arab Emirates. Some Chinese companies are also supplying civilian drones, which exploit the gray area between military and civilian purposes. The US-based Center for Advanced Defense Studies has even claimed that Chinese firms might be sending electronic parts for anti-aircraft missile radars to Russia. And get this, the US has even imposed sanctions on a Chinese company that it claims provided satellite imagery to Russian mercenary forces fighting in Ukraine. So, while China may not be overtly providing Russia with weapons, it seems that they're certainly not shying away from selling them high-tech products that could potentially have military applications. Economically, China-Russia relations are at an all-time high. Let me tell you a story about Russia's trade relations after its invasion of Ukraine in 2021. When Western nations slapped strict sanctions on Russia, they banned imports of oil and exports of high-tech products, which caused many Western firms to cut their connections with Russia entirely. Consequently, Russia's trade with the US, UK, and EU countries plummeted over the course of 2022, leaving the country in dire straits. However, in a stunning turn of events, China's overall trade with Russia hit a record high level of $190 billion in 2022, a whopping 30% increase from the previous year. In fact, Russian imports from China increased by 13% to $76 billion, and its exports to China surged by 43% to $114 billion. It's safe to say that as Russia's trade with Western countries took a nosedive, China emerged as its most important trading partner by far and away. And that's not it. Have you ever wondered how much oil and gas China is buying from Russia? It turns out that almost half of all the Russian government's annual revenues come from oil and gas, but its sales to EU countries have plummeted over the past year due to sanctions. However, Russia has made up for this shortfall by increasing sales to Asia. So, who's buying all this Russian oil and gas? Well, in 2022, Russia exported twice as much liquid petroleum gas, LPG, to China than it did the year before, and it delivered 50% more natural gas via the Power of Siberia pipeline, as well as 10% more crude oil. That's a lot of fuel. Interestingly, while the G7 group of economically developed countries, along with the European Union and Australia, have tried to impose a worldwide cap on the price of Russian oil transported by sea, China has refused to comply and instead buys Russian crude at market prices. Moreover, there are longer-term plans to expand energy ties between the two countries, such as building a new gas pipeline called the Power of Siberia 2. It's clear that China and Russia have a strong relationship when it comes to energy, and it's not just about buying and selling. But despite all these solid economic and military relations, China would never fully support Moscow in Ukraine and will always hesitate, and here's why. We would once again remind you to subscribe to the channel. The recent Putin and Xi summit sparked rumors that China would side with Russia in the ongoing Ukraine conflict. However, beneath the surface, China's diplomatic strategy seems to be far more nuanced. While it's true that China has been expanding its strategic partnership with Russia, it is not ready to go all in with Moscow on Ukraine. In fact, the truth is quite the opposite. China is using Russia as a pawn to balance its relationships with the West. One clear indication of China's reluctance to support Russia can be seen in a position paper on Ukraine released by China in February 2023. The paper calls for a balance in Ukraine, indicating that China is not ready to fully support Russia's stance on the matter. Moreover, China has also criticized Russia's nuclear blackmailing card on multiple occasions. This suggests that China does not agree with Russia's tactics in dealing with international issues, including the Ukraine conflict. In the end, it's clear that China's stance on the Ukraine conflict is more complicated than meets the eye. While China is expanding its relationship with Russia, it's clear that Beijing still has its reservations. China's diplomatic maneuvering may well be a way to hedge its bets and maintain a careful balance in its relationships with both Russia and the West. Another significant factor is China's economy, which has good relations with the EU and the West. With China's current economic problems, including the zero-COVID policy and a housing bubble, it won't risk further Western sanctions. Moreover, China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative will crumble like a house of cards if the war in Ukraine doesn't stop. This is because the more countries face challenges amid war, the more difficult it would be for China to complete its connectivity projects. Another important point to consider is that China is using Moscow as a bargaining chip for its ongoing dispute with Taiwan. While many speculate that China is supporting Russia in Ukraine, the truth is much more complex. China knows that if it provides military aid to Russia, the West will likely increase its support for Taiwan, which China views as a renegade province. In many ways, this is a tit-for-tat strategy. As the West continues to support Taiwan with weapons and other forms of aid, China responds by providing Moscow with diplomatic cover and military support. However, this support has its limits, and China is unlikely to risk further provoking the West with overt military intervention in Ukraine. The geopolitical chessboard that the West, China, and Russia are playing on would have serious implications for the entire world. In a world dominated by realist politics, there can be no real winner in this game. The losers would be the smaller nations like Ukraine and Taiwan caught in the crossfire. Furthermore, the global economy would continue to be in disarray, with the possibility of recessions on the horizon. This would only lead to greater instability and conflict in the long run. It is important to note that there are no easy solutions to these problems. The best course of action would be for all parties involved to approach these issues with a level head and engage in diplomatic dialogue. It is essential to avoid making these issues a matter of ego or pride, and instead focus on finding peaceful solutions that benefit everyone involved. Ultimately, the fate of the world rests in the hands of its leaders. It is their responsibility to navigate this complex geopolitical landscape with tact and diplomacy. Only through cooperation and dialogue can we hope to find a way forward that benefits everyone involved. If you like our content, do subscribe to the channel for more updates, and do let me know your thoughts on this.